In my video series 3-Minute Game Design and also in various articles of mine, I've talked about a bit of theory that I call the information horizon. The information horizon is basically the distance between the moment new, random, or unknowable information comes into a system and the moment that the player has to make a decision about it. A game that has zero information horizon would be something like rock, paper, scissors, where the very moment that an opponent's move is made known to you, you already had to have made your own decision about what to do about it. On the other hand, infinite information horizon would be like a perfect information game, something like chess or Go. Although while in practice there is some effective, blurry information horizon in chess based on the fact that humans can only look ahead so many steps, you always can look a little bit further ahead than you typically would, and while this could be overstated, some amount of getting better at chess does involve expanding that horizon. In short, the downsides to too small an information horizon is that stuff can feel quite random, with outcomes that feel too centered around guessing. Whereas the downsides to too large an information horizon can be that the game feels overwhelming or stressful to play. There's always more stuff that you could calculate out, and so you kinda should. For turn-based games, especially in single-player turn-based games, it's difficult to discourage players from sitting there for minutes and minutes, essentially solving each game state like a puzzle. This actually happened to some extent for very high-level Oro players. Most modern game designers have, if not a conscious understanding of this theory using this particular language, some sense that their game should probably exist somewhere in between these two ends of the spectrum. Fog of War is a really nice, clear example of something in between, and it's probably the best common example of what I consider like a healthy information horizon. Fog of War is nice because it gives the player some information, enough to work with and make decisions about, at least for the next few turns, while still keeping a lot of information hidden from the player. This frees the player up from having to think about and plan 4 or 5 or 6 turns ahead in advance, but it also gives them enough to know and be able to calculate out more locally. It's a good balance, when used well. It's also nice because it's very intuitive and simple for players to understand. Thematically, it makes sense. The main issue that I have with how Fog of War is implemented in most games is that it is not respected as the information horizon of the game. One of my favorite turn-based tactical war games is One Man Left's Outwitters. It has Fog of War, or at least it does for the first few turns, but if you pump out a half dozen units or just 2 or 3 scout units, it's easy to completely remove Fog of War from the game. If Fog of War is important to this game, then it should probably remain in the game throughout play. There really should not be these situations where there just isn't Fog of War anymore, if this is something that's important to this system. Second, abilities that scan areas arbitrarily, or even the concept of scouting, generally makes it too easy and frivolous to violate the information horizon in any location on the entire map arbitrarily. You should not be able to pay some resource to violate the information horizon because the game needs the information horizon. It's a fundamental part of how this game works. It isn't just some rule, like a buff or a specific terrain type. Essentially, the information horizon should be more or less locked in terms of how much you can see at a given time. There should not really be scouting abilities like the StarCraft ComSat. Instead, make some information known and some information not known. For example, you could do something in StarCraft like have the opponent's command center tech level always be on your HUD at all times. Or perhaps you have access to the information about the opponent's economy specifically. The point is, the designer should decide consciously what is known and not known to the players, and that should be the beginning and the end of that. One thing that a lot of war games run into is the fact that they often allow the player to produce more and more units throughout the match, and each unit has their own vision radius, which necessarily means that as you produce more units, there's less and less Fog of War on the map. I've experimented with a few different concepts for solving this. The obvious solution is to not allow the player to gain new units during a match and strictly limit the number of units in the battle. In Business Demon Tactics, I'm taking this approach. When you capture cave terrain tiles, you find a new unit, but you're only likely to find maybe 1 or 3 of these in a given mission. And you're also likely to lose about 1 to 3 units on most missions too. But even in the case where you did gain 3 or even 4 units, the information is still mostly controlled and thus gets to keep existing. As for scouting by sending some unit off to their death so that you can see some part of the map that you otherwise shouldn't, that's also something that you really can't afford to be doing if you're not producing units throughout the match. Another approach is to do something more experimental. In Astronauts, a small game that I designed working with the amazing game developer Happy Snake, I experimented with the idea that you have one queen unit who is the only unit that gives you vision in a large radius. That way your information horizon is completely fixed, and you need to move the queen in order to reveal new areas of the map. And as she moves, of course, new areas are then hidden as well. You can produce as many units as you want, but they can only go out as far as one tile before the last visible tile, and the units themselves do not give vision. Solutions like this one may be applicable in some situations, and I really encourage people to experiment with rules along these lines. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe and consider becoming a patron on patreon.com/KeithBurgun. See you next time.